Welcome back. In many of the past sessions, we have covered essences of what we are going to discuss, but as we go along, we will go into more rigorous depth and we will essentially go to parts which are the first steps towards your things. Please remember that right after that, you will actually have to do these things. You will have to set up your teams, your enterprises, get your teammates by selection or by coercion, whatever it is, and then get on with doing things. And some of the steps that we discussed today, and especially this one, will be the first steps and the baby steps you take. These will be observed by us. You will be giving grades on this. Your company will get money based on the work done, or funding, as we say it, onto that part, and that will be differentiated. The maximum capacity obviously will be the number of heads into the standard salary that we are supposed to give you onto that part, and it will be shared by whatever protocol you have agreed to in the shareholders agreement for the company. So, you will go through all those steps. Some of the other steps I will illustrate probably in the subsequent sessions. Maybe that will come after 2-3 weeks once we have a process in place, but we will go on with these things. So, next most important thing is market research. We are talking of market research now, and it is very important to know the why, the what and the how, and that is how we will always progress about anything in a generic way. The why is often the most important thing. So, why do we need to know and do market research? Some amount of market research, whether it is structured, unstructured, costly, not costly, does not matter, but the fulfillment of this step is what matters. And the key objectives are, how do we understand our customers? That is the first requirement. Understanding is so important. Sometimes we think we understand, but we do not. Putting into a structure, knowing things more are important. Now, I always believe a mix of quanti, quali, intuition, these three triumvirate is what really makes the market research effective. So, your intuition is to be always respected. That is your differentiation. Everyone can do the same process, but the different results will come only because you are sort of submerging yourself into the process and letting your intuition flow into everything that is there. Respect your intuition and use it. It is the most important tool you have to culture to be successful in life. Understanding the customer is what leads to identifying the opportunities in the true sense. You have a broad thing. This is like needle casting now, getting into the basics of it. All the subsequent steps will depend on it. So, remember onto that part. And once you have done that part of it, you have to reduce risks. Now, that does not mean you are avoiding risks. Please understand, reduce. At any point of time, keep it as reduced as possible and not lesser. Because unless you take risk, you are not different from anyone else. There is no safe bet in business. There is always a risk. But a calculated risk is what comes from knowledge, and that knowledge comes from understanding your customer and identifying the opportunities, mapping these two. That is what gives the measure of risk. What is the probability of the person buying this? What is the risk of not buying this? What is the risk I take in putting up this investment in time, effort, resources and not getting a customer? You should always be aware. This awareness which will let you flexibly pivot if you need to, and you will need to some part. Whether it is large or a big shift, that will depend on the situations, but the fact that you have to be dynamic, the fact that you have to be changed is undeniable and a constant. It is going to happen. You are prepared to take those challenges and think on the feet. And this will also tell you competitive advantages. Now, remember, these two are kind of a give and take. You are getting competitive advantage. Typically, you have risks that are associated with that. And if you reduce risks, then your competitive advantage could go down. So, coming with the sweet balance. Is there a formula for it? Sorry, does not exist. That is where your intuition comes in. These are the precursor steps, but this is really the balancing act. Because all of this, whether it is identifying opportunity and customer, is actually reflecting in competitive advantage. And that is what you are balancing with risks that are palatable, not palatable to do it. What do? You essentially do it in two ways, the primary way and the secondary way. Primary means you are the start point of all sorts of data that you are collecting, and typically you do it by surveys, by interviews. This is often a very not so respected thing at the beginning. It seems drab, but most entrepreneurs that I have talked to, and even myself when I have looked at it, this meandering nonsensical chatter often gives signals which structured questioning goes. I am not disrespecting structured questioning. But I am saying the X factors more often come from here than from here, because everyone is doing it and the questions will be more or less the same. But this is where you pick up cues which are unique to you, because you picked it up, and the chance of someone else picking that up in an unstructured fashion is very, very less. So you as a head or as an entrepreneur, I think this art of interviewing people, being patient, being listening, good listener, remember some of the first sections, this is where it comes to the fore. And that's what you expand on. And this is the second part. Often an individual reacts very different than when in a group. Group dynamics, crowd psychology, all these things done. And focus groups bring out that extensibility. So what happens is, at that time everyone gets a little bit competitive, a little bit assertive, a little bit I also want to add value, and then more nuances come out than just the answer. One person initiates the answer, but the others add on to it and say, but this is also happens, they will contradict, and that entire mesh of what you would have done yourself by interviewing and doing your conclusions are often shortcutted by doing a focus group discussion or a group discussion. This is a very important step. Often people miss out. Especially important for things. Let's understand the practicality. This is not always possible. Please remember that if you're in the B2B segment, you will not be able to get all your customers on the same board and do it. You have to do the assimilation. But in a consumer one, this thing works great. I can tell you one example where a focus group completely changed the way the company that we were building worked. It was a company which I think we managed it very badly, but the product was there, the execution was flawed. It was called Unamia. And initially we started off in thinking of making a kids clothing line. But finally, because of the focus group discussions, we ended up making customized but not so unique program group types, almost Legofying kids clothing. And when focus groups happened, we realized that most mothers actually want uniqueness in their kids, but they want it to be also trendy and keeping with it. So we came up with a base template, which is the cut and all those things, but the color combinations, all those things would be customized. Now that we would have not got had we not put them into focus group, because our questions and all were, what kind of clothing do you need? Oh, I need cotton, I need. When we put them on a focus group, then, but I actually like my kid to be there, because suddenly when they realize every mother is going to buy the same clothing, they said, मेरे बच्चे का क्या होगा? वो तो एक जैसा दिखेगा, school uniform हो जाएगा. Then they started saying incidences, and that was provoked because of the group thing. So you never know what this come up. In consumer, you have to do this. And last, but not the least, I mean, what do you essentially look at from that under observation part of it on that part? Observation is key onto those parts, and this is what's going to differentiate. There will be a lot of implicit information coming, and that's your observation power and your analysis power that will make these things much more fruitful. I apologize for that part. This is observation, right, onto that part. So make sure that this is observation on that part. Secondary is when you don't rely on this part, or someone has done some of the research, you're using that. It could be industry reports, it could be government data, it could be academic. Now in a B2C, this is very important. In a B2B, this often is more important, because you will not get the data, no one will be able to tell you. You have, for example, you are saying you want to develop a ceramic insulator for EVs. Now, only the EV industry is your customer. See if there is a problem, and that will come from the industry reports, that this is the biggest problem, this is the biggest part of it. A lot of research that goes in from material science and all will come. Academic journals are often, that's academic, but they often give a wealth. And the good thing is, everyone thinks like that. They have a snooty attitude towards that. You may get an undue advantage just because you are going to it and others are not taking the pain for it. So sometimes the laborious grind, the stupid things often give you a competitive advantage. And it's never ever shown more than in market research. The well-read, diversified, going into depth of other researches often are the guys who find out that absolutely plain to the visible eye but invisible element which can make all the difference between a successful and a not so successful venture. It may succeed, but that extra oomph will come when you have gone into it, because this is actually detail which everyone missed out, but you didn't, because you went through it with thorough parts of it. And there are conjugate industries. Let's say, for example, tourism industry, where you have to go both with the secondary and the primary, because it's showing trends and patterns, and people do have a tendency of flocking together, going and repeating things which others have done. But individual choices do matter. Are they going to historical places? Are they going to experiences? Those patterns will emerge both from here, and you will know that when you're making the customer personas, remember the one we talked about, on that part, and which person are you allocating this guy to. And remember, somewhere in this sort of things, a person could have multiple persona also. That's not a psychological problem. That's actually how most people are. How? That's the most important thing, isn't it? Everyone knows what to do, why to do, how to do it. There is no silver bullet. You have to find your own way. But these are the inherent steps that you have to do. They may seem obvious, but it's very important to go through each of these steps. And the simplicity of this process is its strength and weakness. Weakness because most people take it as a ghicata pita, normal thing, or kaise bhi kar do. But when someone pays attention to each of these things, a lot of fine print is there. Define problems and objectives. Easier said than done. Unless you have done step 1, step 2 of understanding your consumer, looking at the different personas, understanding the problems, you will never be able to frame this properly. And if you don't frame this properly, this will come out erroneously. Garbage in, garbage out. So make sure that your root processes, no matter what you are following, if it's sequential, every step needs to be as accurate as possible, because any error here will get multiplied down the chain. If you make an error here and an error here, the net error here would be the multiplication of all these steps. So the lesser errors you do at each step, the more sacrosanct the data becomes downstream. That's important in any sequential process. Research plan development is, how do I conduct the research? What's the cost of it? What is the cost benefit analysis of the method? Do I do an online thing? Do I do an offline thing? If I do an online thing, am I going to get biased samples? If I do an offline thing, will it be too spurious a data? Should I do 40% online, 60% offline? No rules. It's your intuition and your part, but calibrated through this part and the methodologies that you know. You always have to retrofit this and this as well as this and this. That balancing is what your value addition. Everyone knows the steps, but how you mix and match, how you intervene, how you go back to the drawing board and rethink it, that's the difference of your effort. That is what we mean by execution prowess. And as you develop, you will do it. And you learn from mistakes and you learn from others' mistakes also. So take a look at it. Whenever someone is talking about it, think how you would improve it, or is that gospel? That is acceptance. And then you will realize sometimes that I am not thinking independently at all. I am just copy pasting it. I am being an imposter. That judgment, that fairness that you have in yourself is manifested at the first step here itself, because this will actually set the tone for how good your product is structured in the future. Obviously, collect data. But one of the important points of collecting data is, no matter how well you collect data, there are going to be errors. How do you find out errors? That should be part of your collection data process. Which survey do you ignore because something is not matching up? How do you plan your research plan? Will have elements of this already. You will have resonance questions, you will have repeat questions where any incongruency, any inconsistency will show up. There are methodologies for each of them, and the reading materials will cover them. But collecting data and looking at it, okay, my research plan, I need to do it this way, but it has this weakness. So when I am collecting data, I need to be careful. One of the big important things of collective data is designing for follow-up questions. Not everyone needs to be asked every question. If you do it, it's boring. But if someone gives an answer and there is a one thing, then you need to ask a follow-up question. Now that will depend on the methodology and the plan. And you will see a dynamic research plan may work for you, a static research plan may work for you. These are the decisions that will take. Obviously, then comes to analyzing data. How you analyze should be in keeping with what is the objective, why you are doing it. Do not do analysis which is not connected just because someone told you. Do not do a regression if you don't need to regress. Do not do a clustering if you don't need to cluster. This should determine what the analysis of the data should be. Then you have to report your findings. Why is reporting important? Reporting is a great online tool and it keeps everyone in the sync. But that doesn't mean everyone should get everything. When you are reporting, discretion is important. Do not give more information than necessary to each relevant person. So the production person give relevant information, to the marketing person give relevant information. If they have an interest, by all means keep it transparent. So do not hide this either by saying that, oh, I don't want to share this information with everyone. Maybe you need to hide a bit, but at least have the openness. As you get bigger, you will understand what is the closure set, and that will also say how open are you as an organization. Typically, the more open as an organization you are, the better it is, but you will not believe me till you feel it. The reason is innovation can come from anywhere, can come from a peon. I can give one example in one of the businesses we are doing. The clerks and the morning peons were the most important thing. The reason is they used to go and collect data from the newspapers by just scanning it and putting it up. They were very important because they selected which newspapers to buy, they had the local knowledge. And then from that we could find out the buying power of a particular area, or what are the things people are doing, what stocks are mostly being talked about, what you do in the social media. But in those era and all, there was no electronic media, so we had to rely on it. These people were a very important part. They were innovating and we were standing on the innovation. So that's the reason openness always helps, but that's a discretion, that's a choice, and your intuitive decision will be very important here. Who do you share what things? So report findings looks like most obvious, but there are nuances to it. Who do you report what to is a very important question. And that's something no one can answer for you. You have to sort it out for yourself. Now comes the crux. All this is fine. What is the use of it? The use is to make decisions. The use is to make decisions and stand by it. The use is to contradict the decisions you have taken and change them. That's the hardest part. But data bolta hai. Whenever you see data speaking against decisions you have taken, don't hold on to ego. Be data driven, but at the same time, don't undermine your intuition just because data is saying something. What it means is, I need deeper research till you are satisfied, but don't take too much time, because fast decisions are important. Now, this is one thing I want to leave you with, as what is decision making. As you go along with business, you will see one very weird thing. Taking decisions is most important. Being indecisive is the biggest cost an organization can have. So go ahead and take decisions. Don't take decisions without thinking, but don't be too scared that what if I take a wrong decision. If you take a wrong decision, you can correct it. If you take a right decision, doesn't mean it's the best. So first thing that I said in first, just because you are the best doesn't mean you can be better. Data will lead the way for that part. And just because something is better, you're not getting some better idea, doesn't mean you should not start off with good. That balance of this is what gets it that. That's a risk-taking ability. Going with the good and having the confidence that you'll make it the best. Never stopping at the best and still trying to make it better. This is a continuous journey. And at any point of time, market research will do it. It's not just at the onset of your business. It has to be an integral part. And you have to think, the brightest entrepreneurs often put these sensors inside every process to get a huge amount of market research data. Amazon is Amazon because every click you make, they're doing a market research out of it. They know where you go. They know people who buy this also buy that. How do you think that comes? Because they have ingrained market research into their product, because their product demanded that they are only going to grow by market research. I end with that for this session. See you in the next session.